Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into Plato's Republic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and specifically some excerpts that deal with some really fascinating ideas about education and storytelling,
Okay.
and even the nature of the gods themselves.
Interesting.
Yeah, so get ready to unpack some pretty thought-provoking concepts like noble lies,
Mm.
censorship,
Okay.
and how ancient Greek society really grappled with ideas about truth and fiction.
So these ideas, even though they're ancient, they still kind of resonate with us today.
So to start off, Socrates, who, as you know, is Plato's main character in his dialogues,
Right.
he believes that storytelling is like incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
particularly for young minds.
Makes sense.
He sees stories as this key tool for shaping beliefs and morals.
And in ancient Greece, myths and legends weren't just entertainment. They were like deeply ingrained in their culture
Yeah.
and education.
Oh,
Like these stories
Yeah.
explain natural phenomena. They provided moral guidance
Right.
and even served as a kind of historical record.
So using stories to educate young people
Yeah,
was pretty common practice.
totally.
But Socrates takes this a step further
Okay.
with this idea
Yeah.
of the noble lie.
The noble lie.
Yeah, can you explain what he means by that?
Sure. So a noble lie, as Socrates describes it,
Yeah.
is basically a fictional story
Okay.
told with the intention of promoting social harmony
Okay.
or teaching a valuable lesson,
Okay.
even if it's not factually true.
Oh, wow.
So he suggests that sometimes like a carefully crafted fiction
Right.
can be more effective
Yeah.
than a harsh truth,
Wow.
especially when it comes to like
Yeah.
shaping young minds
Uh-huh.
and maintaining social order.
So essentially, it's kind of like a lie, but for the greater good.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, does this justify any white lie if it serves a supposedly good purpose? What implications could this have for how we evaluate information and leadership today?
That's a great question. Think about it.
Yeah.
National myths, origin stories, even some religious narratives often contain like elements of truth,
Okay.
but they're embellished or fictionalized
Right.
to serve a particular purpose.
Right.
It makes you question where the line is drawn between truth and fiction and who gets to decide.
That's a really good point.
Right.
It forces us to think critically about the narratives we're presented with
Absolutely.
every day, not just in ancient texts, but in the news, social media, even in our personal lives.
Yeah.
Who's shaping these narratives? And what impact do they have on our understanding of the world?
Precisely.
Okay, so
Moving on, another fascinating aspect of this section
yeah.
is Socrates' exploration of the nature of the gods.
Okay.
He argues that God, being inherently good,
Right.
cannot be the source of evil.
So how does he reconcile the existence of bad things in the world with this idea of a benevolent God?
Well, he challenges traditional Greek mythology,
Okay.
where the gods were often depicted as fickle and prone to both good and bad deeds. So he's presenting a more philosophical view, arguing that true goodness cannot be the origin of anything harmful.
So he's essentially saying that bad things happen,
Yeah,
but we can't blame the gods for them.
exactly.
Okay.
And it leads him to explore
Yeah.
whether it's even possible
Okay.
for a god to deceive or lie.
Okay.
Because he seems to believe that if God is the source of truth
Right.
and goodness, then falsehood would be fundamentally opposed to their nature.
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but what did the ancient Greeks think about all of this? Did they accept Socrates' ideas?
Well, it's important to remember that Plato's dialogues
Yeah.
are philosophical explorations,
Right.
not necessarily reflections of universally held beliefs.
Right.
But Socrates' ideas
Yeah.
certainly challenged conventional thinking,
Oh,
particularly when it came to the portrayal of the gods
okay.
in art and literature.
Got it.
He was very specific
Yeah.
about what he considered unacceptable storytelling,
Right.
especially when it came to depictions of the divine.
Right. He believed that certain stories, especially those portraying the gods in a negative light,
Exactly.
could corrupt young mind and disrupt social harmony.
Totally.
It sounds like he's advocating for a kind of censorship.
It does indeed.
Oh.
Socrates goes so far as to call out specific passages
Really?
from Homer and Aeschylus that he finds problematic, for instance.
Yeah.
He criticizes the story of Zeus sending a deceptive dream to Agamemnon
Okay.
in the Iliad and Apollo's false prophecy about Achilles' long life
Okay.
in a lost play by Aeschylus.
So he's basically taking on these literary giants
Yeah.
and saying, hey,
Right.
these classic stories are sending the wrong message about the gods.
Yes. And it's a really bold move.
Wow.
He's arguing that these depictions contradict his view
Yeah.
of a truthful and unchanging God.
Right.
He believes stories about the gods should be morally uplifting
Okay.
and consistent with this philosophical understanding
Right.
of their nature.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about Greek mythology. So,
All right.
so help me understand this.
Yeah,
Is Socrates suggesting we should like erase all stories that depict gods
that's a great question.
behaving badly?
And it leads us to another complex idea.
Okay.
It really highlights his concern about the power of stories
Right.
to shape like beliefs
Mhm.
and behavior.
Yeah, so it's not just about gods and goddesses. It's like Socrates is outlining a whole philosophy of education, like a way to cultivate virtuous and responsible citizens.
Yeah, he's concerned with stories about heroes and humans, too.
Oh, okay.
Like suggesting that all narratives should uphold certain moral standards.
Interesting.
Like he believes that stories that depict actions that are considered
Yeah.
corrupting or harmful could be detrimental to good character and social harmony.
It almost sounds like he's advocating for censorship. Like if Socrates were around today, would he be like trying to ban certain books or movies or video games?
Right.
It makes you wonder how his ideas would apply to our modern media landscape.
It's a fascinating question. I mean, we have to remember the historical context in ancient Athens stories,
Yeah.
especially those performed in public theaters,
Right.
played a huge role
Right.
in shaping public opinion and morality.
Yeah.
So while it's not a direct comparison to
Yeah.
today's media,
Yeah.
there are definitely some parallels.
For sure, it makes you think about current debates
Absolutely.
surrounding violence in the media,
Yeah,
representation of different groups, and the influence of social media, especially on young people.
totally.
So while we might not have Socrates calling for outright censorship, we're still grappling with similar concern about how narratives impact our beliefs and actions.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing conversation.
Totally.
Like, we value freedom of expression, but we also recognize that words and images have a profound impact.
For sure.
Particularly on developing minds.
Yeah, okay, so going back to the Republic, we've talked about the noble lie
Right.
and these concerns about potentially harmful narrative. But what kind of stories did Socrates believe were acceptable?
Right.
Like, what should poets and storytellers be focusing on?
That's what I'm curious about, too. Well, Plato doesn't provide like a specific list of approved stories. Based on what Socrates says, we can get a sense of his preferred themes.
Okay.
He stresses truthfulness, especially when portraying the gods.
So no more Zeus throwing lightning bolts in a fit of rage.
Well, perhaps not those exact stories.
Okay.
But, Socrates seems to be advocating for a more philosophical
Right.
and morally elevated portrayal of the divine. He wants narratives that reinforce a just and ordered cosmos where good is ultimately rewarded and evil punished.
Interesting.
He sees stories as a way to teach valuable lessons about virtue, courage, and the importance of living a good life.
So it's almost like he's looking for like ancient Greek morality tales.
Right.
I'm thinking of like those classic myths about heroes like Heracles or Odysseus.
Exactly.
They faced these incredible challenges, but ultimately they triumphed through courage and strength and cleverness.
Those are the kinds of narratives that Socrates likely would have approved of. Stories that celebrate virtue and inspire citizens to strive for excellence.
And remember, he's outlining the education for the guardians.
Exactly.
That elite class who will govern the ideal city, what that he describes in the Republic.
Exactly.
So these stories aren't just entertainment for Socrates. They're a crucial element in creating a just and harmonious society. It really highlights how carefully he considered the power of stories to shape both individuals and society as a whole. It's a reminder that narratives aren't just these passive forms of entertainment. They can have a genuine impact
They do.
on how we think and behave.
Absolutely. And that's a lesson that is just as relevant today.
Totally.
I mean, we are constantly bombarded with stories through books, movies, TV, social media, even advertising. So being aware of the messages these narratives carry and their potential influence on our thoughts and actions is crucial.
It's almost as if like we're all those guardians
Yes.
that Socrates was talking about.
Exactly.
We have to be discerning consumers of stories, choosing those that uplift us, challenge us, and help us become the best versions of ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. Just as Socrates was concerned about the stories being told in his time, we also have a responsibility to engage critically with the narratives that shape our world.
Totally.
Okay.
But what do you think Socrates would make of our modern world with its constant barrage of information and entertainment? Would he be overwhelmed,
I don't know.
horrified, or maybe even a little intrigued?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to imagine Socrates like navigating our modern world.
Right.
Would he be like scrolling through social media,
I know.
debating philosophy in online forums?
Who knows?
I wonder if he would be impressed by like the access to information,
Yeah.
or maybe dismayed by like
Right.
the spread of misinformation.
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But I imagine he'd be fascinated
Yeah.
by the sheer volume and variety of stories being told today.
Yeah.
And he'd likely have strong opinions about their impact on our individual and collective consciousness. I mean, remember, he was deeply concerned with the influence of narratives on character development and societal harmony.
It's funny to picture him like shaking his head
I know.
at some of the things people post online.
What?
But on a more serious note, do you think you'd see any positive aspects to our modern approach to storytelling?
He might be surprised by the level of control individuals now have over the narratives they consume and create.
That's interesting.
Like in ancient Greece, storytelling was more communal with poets and playwrights
Uh-huh.
performing for large audiences. Today, we can curate our own media diets,
That's a good point.
choosing what we read, watch, and listen to.
Yeah, we have so many choices,
We do.
but also a greater responsibility
Yeah.
to filter the information
Right.
we're exposed to.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like Socrates' ideas about censorship
Right.
have taken on like a new meaning
It's true.
in the digital age.
Yeah.
Instead of a central authority deciding what we can see,
Right.
we're tasked with self-censoring,
Yeah.
choosing which narratives we allow into our own minds.
It's a fascinating twist
Right.
on this age-old debate
Yeah.
about truth lies and the power of storytelling.
It raises even more questions
It does.
about technology's role, the ethics of information sharing, and the future of narrative itself.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep
Oh,
dive,
yeah.
exploring Socrates' ideas about education, the noble lie,
Mm.
his views on the nature of the gods,
Mm-hmm.
and his concerns about potentially harmful narratives.
Yeah, but before we wrap up, I
Mhm.
want to leave our listener with
Yeah.
a final thought-provoking question.
Yes, let's bring it back to them.
What would Socrates think about the stories
Rules.
we consider acceptable or harmful today?
Yeah.
What power do we as individuals
Yeah.
give to storytellers in shaping our understanding of the world?
That's the question we should all be asking ourselves.
Right.
We all participate in shaping the narrative landscape,
We do.
both through the stories we consume,
Yeah.
the stories we tell.
So the next time you pick up a book,
Yeah.
watch a movie, or
Mhm.
even scroll through social media,
Right.
remember the power of stories. They can inform us, inspire us, and even transform us.
For sure.
But they can also mislead, manipulate, and divide us. It's up to each of us to be critical thinkers, to question the narratives we encounter, and to choose those that align with our values
Yes,
and contribute to a better world.
as Socrates might say.
Yeah.
The unexamined narrative is not worth consuming.
What a great way to sum it all up.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Plato's Republic.
Of course.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yes.
and keep those intellectual gears turning.
Absolutely.